Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Lunch and Learn. I'm Julie Secord, filling in for Shauna Levine today. Lunch and Learn has been a great program for us. We like doing current topics, and we're so glad that so many of you have come today to enjoy. So today's topic, sustainability. Abby Shute is WAYLAND'S Sustainability Manager. She started recently in April 2023. And her mission is to implement the town's climate action mobilization plan. She does this through managing projects, obtaining funding, and community engagement. She holds a master's degree in sustainable development and climate change and has experience in nonprofit work, conservation, and facilities management. We are delighted to have Abby here with us. For those who were not able to attend today, we are recording this for Waycam TV. Abby Shute.
Just in time.
There you go.
Is it still working? Oh, excellent. Yes. Okay, well, thank you, Julie. Yeah, and hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, as Julie said, my name is Abby Shute, and I am the Sustainability Manager for the town of Wayland. So, I was chosen by the town as the Sustainability Manager to implement the Climate Action Mobilization Plan. So, the Climate Action Plan contains goals and guidance for Wayland to combat climate change and to meet state emissions reduction requirements. So as Julie said again, I have a background in facilities management, conservation, and nonprofit work. I also hold a master's degree in sustainable development and climate change. So through this, I bring a unique skill set to drive our town towards a sustainable future. So I'm here today to share details about climate change, identify state and town goals to combat and prepare for climate change, and to share details about how residents can get involved. So this is one of my first speaker series, but there will be more in the future if you're interested in learning more. And I'm going to cover quite a few topics today. Some of them may provoke questions. I do want to ask that you save those questions for the end, as we have set aside plenty of time for discussion. So I want to start today by reviewing the basics of what causes our climate to change. So the big picture is the greenhouse effect. The sun's rays reach the Earth's surface and are absorbed and re-emitted as heat. Greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, absorb and are re-radiated some of this, or absorb and re-radiate some of this heat. So increased amounts of greenhouse gases means more heat is trapped and thus the Earth warms. Human activities, especially the burning of fossil fuels, have increased the concentration of atmospheric carbon dioxide. So just last week, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA, estimated the daily carbon dioxide concentration to be 420 parts per million. So to put this into perspective, air bubble samples from ice cores indicate that prior to the Industrial Revolution, which was in the 1700s, atmospheric carbon dioxide was 280 parts per million or less. So due to this, we're seeing an increase in average global surface temperature. The oceans are warming and becoming more acidic. There's a decline in sea ice in the Arctic, and sea levels are rising. So if emissions continue to rise, then further warming up to 4.8 degrees Celsius is expected by the end of the century. Aggressive response is needed to keep warming below 4.8 degrees Celsius, with our best case scenario goal of 2.6 degrees Celsius. Although, even in the best case scenario, we will still see impacts in our human societies and the natural world. So to break this down further, this diagram is from the 2022 Massachusetts Climate Change Assessment. Historically, Massachusetts has seen under 10 days per year over 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and hot days commonly felt like 81 degrees Fahrenheit. But 2050 projections estimate that we will see about 25 days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and hot days will feel more like 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Or as the diagram shows, by 2050, Massachusetts will feel more like today's Maryland or Virginia. So some of you may be thinking, well, Virginia isn't so bad, it's a lovely place. Unfortunately, climate change isn't just going to make Massachusetts warmer, but it's going to affect every natural system. So one example that you may not have heard involves lobsters. So now the Gulf of Maine is warming incredibly fast, and due to this, Maine lobsters are moving further north. So these lobsters have moved so far north, in fact, that a majority of those who trap lobsters in the Gulf of Maine are no longer doing it. They have shifted to farm seaweed for its use in supplements, food, and cosmetics. So now that's great that lobster trappers are adapting, but what are we losing when this happens? So these ecosystems are changing. Lobsters are losing their habitat. Family lobster fishing businesses, restaurants, coastal cultures, all of these things are changing. So this impacts animals, people, the planet, tourism, the economy, the list goes on. So everything we do and everything we understand is intertwined in a web of systems. So one thing changes in one system, and there is a ripple effect throughout another system. Now this is called systems thinking, and is really a topic that we could save for another day, but I wanted to mention it because this is how I think when I work to tackle these issues. So we spend most of our time separating topics and subjects so we can break them down into digestible pieces, but subjects like climate change need to be discussed on a larger scale to properly demonstrate the impacts and to reiterate that it is everyone's responsibility to combat this crisis. So in the example before you, this is a basic nested system. I like these because you can see the economy is within society, which is within the natural environment. So it's easy to see the parts and understand how impacts can flow through these layers. So in the case of our friend the lobster, the environment, it's warming oceans, which means the lobsters leave and they head north. Society, no lobsters, means those who make a living off them, the trappers, the chefs in the restaurants, the culture of having Maine lobster, those sorts of things start to dissolve. So moving further into the economy, lack of supply means the industry is in decline. The culture is changing. Demands switch, and lobster trappers now become seaweed farmers to make a living. So systems thinking is very versatile, and you can look at it in many different ways. But the main takeaway here is that we need to review the domino effect across subjects and systems when it comes to climate impacts. So what do we do about all this? Fortunately, it's not all doom and gloom. Things are going to change, but we can work to make those changes less intense and better equip ourselves to handle those changes. So this is where the strategies of mitigation and adaptation come into play. So mitigation, by definition, needs to make less severe. Therefore, the goal of mitigation is to reduce the flow of heat-trapping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Some examples of mitigation are sustainable transportation, like electric vehicles, and clean energy, such as wind or solar. On the other hand, adaptation, by definition, is to become better suited to one's environment, to adapt. Therefore, the goal of adaptation is to adapt to a life in a changing climate. It involves adjusting to actual or expected future climates. Some examples of adaptation are infrastructure improvements, specifically ones that would increase flood protection. So the main takeaway from this concept is that we must work to lessen the impacts of climate change while simultaneously preparing for those impacts. As a result of putting these two strategies together, you create a level of climate resilience. Climate resilience is about successfully coping with and managing the impacts of climate change while preventing those impacts from growing worse. This results in better conservation of resources, improved access to quality local food, and more complete and sustainable communities. Now, I'd like to start to talk a little bit more about Massachusetts' goals for combating climate. So in March of 2021, Governor Baker signed into law an act creating a next generation roadmap for Massachusetts climate policy. So this requires the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs to set statewide emissions limits. So this is how the Massachusetts Clean Energy and Climate Plan was born. In this, Massachusetts set a goal of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions statewide by 2050. The graphic before you displays the 4 key pillars of decarbonization from the Clean Energy and Climate Plan. So these pillars guide state actions and concentrate efforts. And the main takeaway of this is that Massachusetts is now legally responsible for these emissions, and they have identified key areas for action. So Massachusetts has set a strong example by breaking down the sources of greenhouse gas emissions across the state and taking action to reduce those emissions. Now, I won't go into too much detail about state actions, but I wanted to highlight a couple of projects in the realm of electricity. So Walnut Lake Solar Farm is one of the newer installations located in Douglas, Massachusetts. This is on a property managed by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and it consists of 22,400 solar panels and is located on 30 acres of land. The Vineyard Wind Project, south of Martha's Vineyard, has come online in early January and currently sends about 5 megawatts of power to the grid from a single towering wind turbine. The plan is to install a total of 62 turbines with 800 megawatts of capacity, or roughly enough electricity to power 400,000 homes by the end of this year. So in addition to these projects, the state has set strict standards for the grid to continue to become greener each year. These efforts will work together to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from electricity, which equates to 20% of the state's carbon dioxide emissions. The state's climate plan calls for many other actions, but as you can see from these two examples, the state has set a solid foundation and is working to meet these goals. Through all of this, the state has made it clear what needs to be done, and we just need to put in the work and do our part to help them get there. So next, this leads me to the Wayland Climate Action Mobilization Plan. At the spring 2021 town meeting, Wayland voted to declare a climate emergency. So from this, volunteers and members of the Energy and Climate Committee then developed the Climate Action Mobilization Plan, also known as the CAMP, which was adopted by the Select Board in 2022. The CAMP follows the state goal to achieve a minimum 50% reduction in the town's aggregate greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, and this is from the 1990 baseline. So the CAMP also follows the state's goals to reduce the town's aggregate greenhouse gas emissions by 100% in the year 2050. So as you can see from the chart before you, Wayland's emissions look significantly different from the statewide breakdown, with our largest emissions coming from residential vehicles and buildings. So this is where I come in as the sustainability manager. I'm Wayland's first sustainability manager, and I began my role in April of 2023. So as stated before, my mission is to implement the Town Climate Action Mobilization Plan. More than 35 other municipalities in the state have this role, and it is necessary to enable towns to seize opportunities to combat climate change. And since my focus is implementing the CAMP, I'll break it down for you. It has various areas for action, but the main goals are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, green the energy supply, adapt to a changing climate, and reduce waste. And my role is impactful because I'm able to manage capital projects related to the CAMP, source and implement grant funding. Since my start date in April, I have actually brought in over $160,000 in grants with multiple applications still under review. I can also conduct resident outreach and engagement sessions such as this one. So sustainability staff view long-term planning in a way that can build resiliency and preserve communities, as well as act as a point person for residents so they can build resiliency in their daily lives. For those of you who may be interested in reading the CAMP, I have actually brought a copy for you to look at, and web sources that are presented throughout the presentation, including my email, are included on a handout which you can take with you after the presentation as well. And those are located on the back table. So what has Wayland done so far to meet these goals? So actions completed in Wayland prior to my arrival were mainly completed by the Energy and Climate Committee, town staff, volunteer groups like Energize Wayland, and residents. We have 4 solar arrays in town located at the town hall, the middle school, high school, and Department of Public Works buildings. So these arrays that we host offset about 25% of our total municipal emissions. And for EV charging, we have 2 municipal chargers located here at the town hall. For fully electric vehicles, as far as our residents go, we have over 1,200 fully electric vehicles registered in town. For our town fleet, we have 3 vehicles that are fully electric, and our police fleet has 8 hybrid police cruisers. So these groups also worked on several energy efficiency upgrades in town, including converting all of our streetlights to LEDs, and they also did multiple energy efficiency projects in the schools and town buildings. And now while this is quite a large list of tasks completed, we still have quite a ways to go. So for my focus areas and current projects, I'd like to start by discussing solar. The Loker Elementary Solar and the Council on Aging Solar projects are 2 of the bigger projects that are moving forward at this time. And both of these were in progress in one way or another by the time that I had started. So when I began my role, this was a good way for me to dive in head first. Through the help of the Facilities Director, Ben Keith, and John Harper, and the rest of the Energy and Climate Committee, I was able to quickly learn the history of these projects and began to manage their progress. So Loker Solar, you can see on your left, is a rooftop array that is 109 kilowatt DC. So this array will offset about 30% of the school's annual energy usage. And this is the largest array we were able to add to this building without structural reinforcements. One element of the climate action plan worth noting is that projects related to our goals are encouraged only to be completed when they're feasible and cost effective. So in this scenario, structural reinforcements would not have been cost effective, so we opted not to complete them. So further down the line, there is a possibility for expanding this array and potentially adding battery storage as well. For the Council on Aging rooftop and canopy solar systems depicted on the right, this is a project that is a branch of the remodel of the Raytheon building in Town Center. So some of you may have seen the work started to take place over there. The building there will actually be the new Council on Aging. And this project will consist of a 50 kilowatt DC rooftop array and 2 parking lot canopy arrays that equal 115 kilowatt DC. All of this will work together to offset 100% of the building's annual predicted energy usage, thus making this building net zero. So these projects both work to reduce our emissions and green our energy supply, which means they fall under the category of mitigation. So additional projects cover a wide range of topics. So to start, we have Wayland Electricity Choice. Now this is a group electricity purchasing program that will allow the town to use the collective buying power of residents and businesses to take a big step toward increasing the amount of renewable energy in the town's electricity supply. Now this is a coming attraction, but there will be many informational sessions in the future, and I figured it was worth mentioning today as this is one key way for residents to green their energy supply further down the road. So for composting, at this time composting is in full swing at our high school, and it has reduced waste by 70%. And at this time, I'm beginning to work with the school department, the Wayland Green team, and other stakeholders to incorporate composting across the school district. Massachusetts does have a solid waste master plan, and district-wide composting will align with those goals and the goals in our climate action plan. For electric buses, I'm currently exploring grant funding opportunities for these, but current grants are mainly targeted at schools who own their entire fleet. And since we do not own our fleet, grant funding options are limited for the time being. Although we are currently part of the Metro West Regional School Fleet Electrification Study, and this study is working with several communities, including Ashland, Hopkinton, Natick, Concord, and Weston, to identify concrete pathways to school bus electrification. So there may be some creative solutions as a result of this study, such as shared fleets or shared charging infrastructure. But overall, this study will work to identify solutions to common barriers and help us get a clearer vision of how and when we can electrify our school bus fleet. So on a similar note, I'm in the process of drafting a town staff policy known as the Net Zero Vehicle First policy. This will require town staff to consider fully electric or hybrid vehicles when they purchase a new town fleet vehicle. This does consider cost effectiveness, feasibility, department budgets, and department needs. In our climate plan, our 2030 goal is for all new light-duty town vehicles to be fully electric, so this will align with our goals, as well as enable us to apply for additional grant funding, since this policy is a requirement for a specific Massachusetts Department of Energy grants. Additionally, we are working on energy and efficiency upgrades here in the town hall in the form of an energy services contract. So from this, we will be displacing some of the building's gas heating system and replacing it with electric. So this will reduce the building's carbon footprint and help to save on utility costs. So there are additional projects that are awaiting results of grant applications as well, but since my start date, I have secured $165,770 in grant funding. We received $28,000 of that from the Massachusetts Electric Vehicle Incentive Program for public access charging at the new Council on Aging building. We received roughly $92,000 from the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resourcing for a retro commissioning project at our Department of Public Works building, which will restore the building's heating and cooling system to proper function. Alongside that, we are also looking at multiple weatherization projects in the town building and at Clay Pit Hill Elementary School. Lastly, we have received $44,000 for our Senior Heat Resiliency Campaign for the Metropolitan Area Planning Council's Accelerating Climate Resiliency Program. And I'll go into more details about this program in a moment. Overall, within my first year, I'm working to chip away at the projects that are already underway. I want to have the most grant funding readily available, and will make substantial strides towards our goal. From there on, I plan to work strategically to complete our more complex goals in a timely manner. By 2025, my goal is to have completed an updated review of our emissions so we can track our progress towards our 2030 goals. And now I wanted to take some time to discuss how residents can get involved and introduce one of our project partners. So I understand making changes sometimes can seem like a huge undertaking, but there are many low and even no cost actions you can take starting today. So you can use less energy or monitor your electricity usage. So you leave your porch lights on all night. My mom was the culprit of this. But you can install a timer, or you can just shut them off as soon as you come home to reduce the time that they're on. You can grow your own food in a community garden at home, or you can even buy local. Attend events like this one. You can learn more information and make connections in your community. You can buy less. There's also books about this that you can check out from the library. There's A Year of Nothing New. I read that. It's pretty inspiring. So you can switch to more efficient appliances and light bulbs. You know, are all of your light bulbs high efficiency LEDs? This is really a simple switch that can save you money as well as energy. And you can eat less meat or dairy. And the list really goes on and on. There's very much more you can do as well. We all need to change, but we also need to realize that these changes are not one size fits all. If you can't go out and buy an electric car because it's out of your budget, that's completely fine. Everyone is unique, and as long as you do your best to make an effort, you're doing your part. So don't feel pressured also to make a dozen changes right now. Sustainability is about doing something consistently and for long periods. And if you'd like to learn more about other actions you can take, you can go online to energizewayland.org. This is also listed on your resource handout. And this website is interactive, so you can log your achievements, connect with resources, and see events that are going on in the community. So this leads me to our next and final topic, which is that Wayland has recently secured a grant for a senior heat resiliency campaign. And this is a program to help seniors combat extreme heat. So this grant is earmarked for Wayland to engage in a collaborative effort with Ashland, Framingham, Natick, and Weston to address the escalating impacts of extreme heat caused by climate change. So notably, the summer of 2023 set a record for heat, which highlights the urgency of this issue. Coupled with this, extreme heat disproportionately affects our senior citizens for various reasons, including health status and living conditions. So the baby boomer generation is a large generation, and this means that across the US by 2030, we will have more residents over the age of 65 than children under the age of 18. So we're working now to combat this issue to fill information gaps, improve processes, and increase the availability of resources before the demand increases. And this is not only because of the senior population increase, but also because of the increased periods of extreme heat. So in order to do this properly, we need feedback from our current seniors to understand what factors are impacting them the most. This is an important opportunity that residents in any of the collaborative towns can be a part of. If you are not a resident in one of these towns, but you would like to provide feedback, you still have an opportunity to get involved, as this program is being designed to be replicated across the state. So the feedback for this program will come from residents who work as senior climate liaisons. Now, we will go into more detail into this role in a moment, but to be brief, the Senior Climate Liaison role is a temporary contracted opportunity through Mass Energize. This is not the Senior Tax Work-Off Program, and it is not a job through the town of Wayland, Weston, Acton, Framingham, or Natick. Although senior liaisons will be paid as a stipend, through a stipend, and will work with myself, other project team members, and senior liaisons from other communities. So here with me today is the Executive Director of Mass Energize and Program Manager of our Heat Resiliency Campaign, Nathan Scott. And Nathan is here today to explain his role in this program, explain more of the details about what you can do to get involved. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. It's really nice to be here, and thank you for that great introduction. How many of you were aware of all the things that Abby and the Office of Sustainability has been doing? Good. Okay. It's really an impressive list. As I saw here watching, showing all those slides, I'm like, she's a busy woman, isn't she? So, okay. So as Abby, thank you for the introduction. So my name is Nathan Scott. I'm the Executive Director of Mass Energize. We actually have several of our board members and people who've worked closely with Mass Energize living here in Wayland. In fact, the founder of Mass Energize is also a Wayland resident, Ellen Tone. And she, in 2019, founded Mass Energize along with a few other people who were really involved in supporting climate action. So just a brief history about Mass Energize, and then I really want to spend more time talking about the campaign. But just a little bit about us. We're a nonprofit organization really working with communities to help support residents to be taking climate action. So some of you, I hope, are familiar with and use the Energize Wayland site. How many of you do know about the Energize Wayland site? Okay, good. You know about it, and I hope have been on it. Perhaps you've used some of the resources. But what we do as Mass Energize is we help communities like Wayland to set up information sharing, documentation of, the site. If you go onto the site, it does a lot of different things. It tracks energy usage. It helps connect residents, neighbors with neighbors who are taking climate action, provides a host for testimonials, so a variety of things. So it's a really good resource, and I hope that you'll visit the energizewayland.org site. So that's what we do as Mass Energize. We work with communities. Now, we were fortunate that Abby and Julie Gagan, does everybody know Julie here? Julie, I think, will introduce herself in a minute, but she's the sustainability manager in Weston. So I really appreciated that they contacted Mass Energize to say, hey, it seems that you meaning Mass Energize, would play a good role in helping us to roll out this campaign, supporting seniors, elders in these 5 communities with, who are increasingly, the heat stress, as we've talked about, is an increasing problem. So I have been invited to be, or Mass Energize is going to be in the role of the program manager. So what we are going to be doing is helping you here in the town of Wayland, but also these other towns, to really kind of, how are we going to roll out this program to best receive information from you. You are the residents of Wayland, you are the residents who feel the heat stress. I mean, we all feel it, but what we want to do is really understand from you what are the ways in which we can support not just senior citizens, but all of our communities who are facing increased heat stress. So some of the things that we're going to be doing is doing a lot of outreach to the communities. And Abby mentioned, and I'll talk about it in a minute, the Senior Heat Liaison. But we're going to be doing outreach, we're going to be collecting a lot of data so that we, the towns, can be responding better. What are the needs of the communities? What are the issues you face? What are the issues, not just you, but your fellow residents, people, your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues? What we're hoping to do is really to increase the information flow and getting feedback from the communities in terms of what are the stresses you're feeling, and then how might the towns address some of those issues. We're also going to be providing kind of regional resources. So what's nice about this project is that it's not only going to be focused on Wayland itself, but the 5 communities, and then think about how we can share resources. I'm sorry, I started talking about my other notes, but I do want to just go back up here to talk a little bit specifically about the campaign. And so the goals, as you can see, are really to increase both the mitigation and the adaptation regarding extreme heat. I mean, we all know that climate change is affecting us in many, many ways. Fortunately, here in Wayland, well, I don't know actually how much. Flooding is not as great an issue. I think flooding is an issue everywhere, but I don't think it's as great. But one of the issues we all face here in the kind of the Metro West is the extreme heat. Heat is, and as we all know, last summer was the hottest summer on record. Not only on the record, but the hottest summer in kind of, I mean, I've forgotten exactly how best to describe it, but it was the Earth has been heating, and last summer was the not just recorded history, but in recent, it's since the summer was the hottest since, help me out here, it's since the, again, I'm trying to get beyond just since people have been taking records, but since human civilization has been, has been extant on the planet. We are getting into an ever hotter period of the Earth's cycle, and so it's becoming a greater. And the human bodies, we're not fully adapted for the kinds of heat that we're going to be facing. So what we're trying to do is try to understand that, and then develop kind of the heat action plans and town supports so that we can really build resilience. That's ultimately what we're after. So a couple of the things that we're going to be doing is really, we are going, and I'll be talking about this in a moment, but we're really going to be recruiting liaisons who can really speak to the effects of heat stress, and then communicating those to us and to the town so that we can better manage them. In this case, in terms of what you see up here, we are going to be having a process of selecting those senior heat liaisons. And then we're going to be having, as you can see up here, multiple feedback and discussion sessions. And then from that, we're going to be having public information sessions for the wider communities, speaker series, climate resilience fair, etc. So how are we going to be doing this? We, as Mass Energize, are going to be also partnering with an organization called the Heat Smart Alliance. The Heat Smart Alliance really does a lot of work to promote the adoption of low emissions heating, cooling and related technologies. So several of you have, I think probably have or know about heat pumps. I just learned from Marjorie and Tony that there's a new ground source heat pump going into here in Wayland. So there's a lot of great technology that help to both adapt and mitigate climate change. And heat pump is one of those technologies, and there's a resident here in Wayland named Stephen Bright who is going to be doing some volunteer sessions in training people about to be heat pump coaches and to have information to share with neighbors. We're also going to be working with the community councils on aging and connecting groups with seniors to provide more resources to all of you. So a couple of other things I just want to share, and then we can talk a little bit about the position of the heat pump liaison. But our goal is really to increase resiliency. That's ultimately what we're hoping to provide here is how can we provide resiliency to seniors so this project gives seniors a platform, gives you a platform to voice your concerns and provide feedback. That's what we're looking for. And then from this feedback, the project team will be focusing on providing seniors with the knowledge, resource tools to effectively combat extreme heat and close any of the knowledge gaps regarding the effects of heat. What are we going to do with that heat? Well, this feedback will be provided the feedback being provided by the senior climate liaisons will, as Abby mentioned earlier, will provide the town residents with a platform, a forum, which will then be collected and collated, and then we're going to be doing that throughout the 5 communities. So just to be clear that the role of the liaisons, which we are going to be recruiting, as Abby mentioned, is not a tax write-off program, and it's not a town position. So you'll be working with us, Mass Energize. So this is an opportunity to help support other members of your community. And then we, Mass Energize, will be working with not just the ones here in Wayland, but throughout the 5 communities. So a couple other things, and I don't know if folks got a chance to see, but on the back table, there's a description of this role. So I won't go into too much detail right now, because this does give a lot more of what the job description is, but if you didn't get a chance to pick one up, please, after the session, do pick it up. It has the details of when the start and end dates are. We are recruiting, and we're going to be starting in March, ending in December. I won't go through all the details right now, but it's a position that I think it's going to be an important position, because we're really going to be relying quite heavily on you to share the information, to give us feedback, so that we can more effectively do some town planning. There's a stipend involved, a $1,000 stipend, and you'll see some of the requirements. So this program is in its early stage, but at this time we're trying to generate interest and let people know about the senior liaison role. If you want more information, as I mentioned, there's information on the back about the position, and then also Abby is happy to answer questions about this. She'll be the key contact role for this. So I think the last thing I just want to say is, if you would like to be a senior climate liaison, your feedback is going to help us to plan information sessions, select speakers for different events, and determine what resources should be made available for seniors who would like to combat extreme heat, so that we can all be living more lives full of resilience. So with that, I'll stop and pass it back to Abby, and then we're happy to take questions. So I'll stop for a moment and ask for other questions specifically, and then we can get into a more general conversation. But any specific questions just to start with? Yes?
Is that information available online?
Yes,
Abby.
yeah, so there are links to everything on the town sustainability website, which is also on the resources page.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes?
My house is all electric. What can I do?
Well, fantastic. What else can you do? Is that the question?
Yes.
Would love to have another conversation, but that's fantastic to know that it's already all electric. And I'd love to hear about other what motivated you to take those actions. Are those things that you invested in and installed yourself? And would love to talk with you about, okay, what are some next steps you could do? Because there's always things we can be doing, but that's fantastic that you've already taken those steps. What are you thinking about? What's next? What would you think what would you like to do next?
Well, I was just wondering if you were talking about something that would be like a town thing for
Mhm.
electric that we could tap into eventually.
Yeah, so are you talking about Wayland electricity choice that I had mentioned?
Right.
Yeah, so that will be a way for you to apply basically green energy to your electric bills. So yes, that is a coming attraction and something that there'll be plenty of resources
How
about.
costly will that be?
So through that program, the town is going to, thank you. So through that program, the town is going to go to market and we're going to source a percentage of, green energy that is at a set rate. Our goal there is to make that rate as competitive as possible. We can't guarantee one way or the other, but if you just sort of keep updates on the program, you'll find out if that's different than your current rate.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't know the details of the Wayland plan, but the community choice aggregation typically actually lowers the rate over what you typically pay. So
That would be a real incentive.
Excellent.
yeah, any other questions about the campaign specifically and/or any other things? And then if not, we can we'll open it up for further conversation. Yes.
Well, I have
Grace,
a
sure.
comment, and maybe a suggestion. If you look around Wayland, everybody has tidy lawns.
Mm.
And we have a long-shaped yard, about a half an acre, and our house is right in the middle of it. And the whole back, we have turned into a meadow woods, which to some people might just be let the weeds grow. But, and then in the front, we're keeping up for our neighbors, except that we didn't have the leaves collected. And my suggestion is, this is when we've invited friends over, I was afraid they would come out to our back deck and say, what the heck is going on here? But they all love it. They think it's beautiful. So I just wondered if a thing could be to encourage Wayland to have a different look. A fashion, a fad, a trend that would actually encourage so many things. The pollinators and the soil that was pretty much wrecked by having our septic redone and some construction done. The weeds are dealing with it. And so the soil is improving very rapidly. So anyway, I never have heard that particular suggestion for a semi-urban, a suburban community, and I wanted to throw that out.
Thank you.
No, that's excellent. That's a really good example of doing what you're comfortable with and doing what you can. So everybody's unique, so you're all going to have different opportunities and things that you love to do. I love that you've done that.
Can I add to that?
Can I
Yeah.
throw in a comment?
Sure. Do you want to pass
From
around?
way back, Jim Crockett of the Victory Garden fame always claimed that there's no such thing as a weed. It's just a plant growing where you don't want it.
That's excellent. That's great.
I love that you shared that. Sorry. I'll speak into the microphone. I love that you shared that. So your next door neighbor, Weston, is #1 and highest water user in the state of Massachusetts per capita. And this has been, water use has been on the select board's agenda and a priority for 6-8 years. We've done tiered water rates. We've really tried to disincentivize personal water use, but that idea of the green, lush lawn is very appealing. And so one of the things that we're doing literally next week, we're gathering a group of people to talk about sustainable landscaping. I just did a presentation to the Weston Garden Club last week. So it'd be great to get your information because maybe we could use your lawn as an example to help incentivize more of a native gardening and native landscaping and just think differently about it. Because I agree with you, it's partly just, it's a value system. Everything that we do is value-based, right? And so when we give a higher value to green lawns or a higher value to, our gas fireplace, we lose that opportunity to reevaluate that, right? And to think a little bit differently. So.
There is a middle ground here. Jackson somebody, Mitnick, I think, or something like that. Madnick. Is kind of a neighbor, and he's developed this native sedge mix that only grows about this tall. So it doesn't need to be mowed. It doesn't look untidy. It is a longer term getting it established kind of thing. But it's not gonna, I think everybody worries about their property values. Is this gonna look like an abandoned house? But if everybody was doing it, then it'd be, how great are your wildflowers? How, so.
Then you know how long it takes to make those look nice, right? It's not year 1, right? It's like year 4 or 5. Anyway, happy to talk with you about that.
Comment on this?
You branching off of this?
Well, I
No,
think
I
this
want to
gentleman.
comment on that issue. Most of you know me, I'm Tom Siaka, I'm a member of the Energy and Climate Committee, also a member of the Heat Smart Alliance. The philosophy of minimizing lawns is actually an element in the Wayland plan. It's already there. It is officially approved by the selectmen. It is the official policy of the town to minimize lawns. So you don't have to apologize for it.
Well, I think one step would be to get signs that you could put on your lawn that would, I've seen some for sale on Etsy, and they give it a name. So I'm establishing a meadow, or leave the leaves because, and I haven't invested, they're about $25 a piece. I haven't invested, but I'm thinking about it. But if the town could provide that, it would be a thing, so.
And minimizing lawns, is that for businesses too?
It's a general policy. The policy is written to minimize lawns and also, by the way, maximize trees. Trees near a building both help our landscape element, but also shade the building. So they're a win-win-win from a climate standpoint.
I'd like to know if there are within the town or the state, somebody that's overseeing some of these operations for energy improvement. I just recently heard that some people are having a real hard time getting refund for heat pump installations through Mass Save. So, I mean, is somebody watching over all these people that are offering these energy-saving programs?
I heard that too.
It was on the news yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Nathan may be able to speak more to this than I do, but I understand that Mass Save is not a perfect program. There's a few things that need to change with it. My understanding is that the DPU plays a role in that regulation.
Yes.
Maybe you can speak to it a bit better. It's something I'd have to learn a bit more about.
Yeah, and I also don't have all the details, but there's also an Energy Efficiency Advisory Committee, the state appointed, and there are state appointed people who do take complaints, are investigating, basically providing, I wouldn't call them a watchdog at all, but they are trying to support residents if there are issues or concerns about some of the Mass Save programs. So Mass Save, as we all know, is trying to do its best job, but is less than perfect, as we all know. But the Energy Efficiency Advisory Commission is a state-funded commission that does provide some of that role that you're talking about.
Let me just, hi. I'm so glad that you asked that question, because one of the motivations for creating this program to begin with was to provide some local checks and balances to heat pump campaigns and installations, and making sure that you have residents, which you already have a lot of good resources here in Wayland, but a lot of other communities don't. They don't have somebody who's knowledgeable about Mass Save. They don't have somebody who understands who the good contractors are. They don't have somebody who can provide, a little bit of feedback on, hey, that's a good heat pump design for your home, or you know what, why don't we get another quote from this contractor or that contractor. My mom, I live in Maynard, so a couple towns over, and my mom also lives in town, and one time recently she was at the hardware store, and there was a guy who had a table, right, and it said, hey, free Mass Save, whatever, I'll come to your house and I'll do the evaluation for Mass Save. This person was not associated with Mass Save. He wasn't intending to utilize those funding mechanisms, and he was kind of taking advantage of the fact that the reality is, and you all know this, that seniors are a very vulnerable population. I feel like I grew up in a time when handshakes were more of the way in which we were able to make choices. And now there's so many people out there that are able to take language that sounds very common and sounds like they know what they're doing, and can take advantage of these, the people who are just trying to do the right thing. And so one of the reasons why we had a lot of motivation to do this kind of program was because, this person was trying to charge my mom 3 times what we paid for our house for heat pump installation for 3 heat pumps. And we had our whole house done. So this is the reality of the world that we're in, unfortunately. It was on the news not too long ago that there were some contractors doing energy savings work that were taking advantage of people in Sudbury and, out in central Mass. And so really this is important for us to do. We all acknowledge that we need to be more energy efficient, and that we all want to do the right thing. And having people who are knowledgeable that you can trust because they're your neighbor and you know where they live is a much better, I think, way for all of us individually, to support making hard technical decisions about the building systems in our houses, which not many of us have expertise doing, and also have some trust built into that decision making.
So if you pick up something like a card like that, should you call Mass Energy and see if that's one of their contractors? Or?
Sure. So we don't. Yes, you're certainly welcome to call us. We don't. There are some other organizations that actually have kind of a vetted list of contractors. We do have we have a list of people who we know have done work in the local community, have been recommended. So we do have a list, but we don't maintain kind of a master list. What we do is we maintain a list of recommended providers.
Right.
And so what you could say is like, oh, is this vendor on your recommended list? And we could certainly do that.
Well, when I had someone come out from Mass Energy, they sent someone out to do my
Mhm.
house insulation and everything. They also came, the manager came out and said, are you happy with the work they did?
Yes, yeah.
Or else they could send someone else.
Mhm,
But I was very
mhm.
happy.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's great to hear. So, yeah, other comments or questions? Yes.
Well, this is like pretty much like on a ground level thing. Like I love the idea of trees, and I know about putting evergreens on the north side and deciduous on the south side. But there are times that I look at trees and I'm thinking that tree is a hazard to a roof, and I just don't know, how do you advise, how do people work to make these decisions that make sense overall? Is there going to be some kind of an advisory here that helps guide with that, or?
With the placement of trees, I'm not aware. I mean, usually the issue of trees also often comes up when you're putting in solar. But I think you're speaking more generally.
Yeah.
And I don't have any information
Because they're a good foundational
about.
way to protect your property when it's done correctly, but I just don't know. I
Yeah,
myself don't know like how to do that or who you would ask.
yeah.
Do you have a tree
property
committee?
owner, by the
Yeah,
way.
do you?
No, my understanding is that we don't have a tree committee, but, I mean, of course, you know, groups like the Garden Club and things like that, the town is responsive to feedback, and it's something I'm happy to explore further for you and maybe get back to you. I know the building department certainly has perspectives
Speak in the
on.
mic, please.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Please,
Okay.
be right by your mouth.
Yes, of course. I understand like the building department likely has a perspective as well on when trees are hazardous, and of course, conservation can probably weigh in on that as well.
okay.
But I'd be happy to get back to you. Do you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, it sort of rolls into that, is
Yeah.
that I'm in a subdivision that's being renovated, is like we're getting another round of, you know, the age groups are moving in and out. And every time somebody comes in, they come in and they chop down all the trees. And Wayland actually does have a thing where if you're taking down more than 7 trees, you have to let Concom know and, you know, replace them and stuff like that, but nobody knows about it, or very few people. So you keep finding people come in and they say, oh, I have to take them down because I'm afraid these pines are gonna fall on my roof. And that's their thing, but the thing is, we're losing, because I also live near the pike, we're losing sound barrier, and we're also just losing shade. So like, I left our whole back like that, but now I've got neighbors, even though I had the property surveyed, you know, people come in and say, oh, you're hanging over, and they come in onto our side, and the tree guys don't care because they're getting paid to take the trees down, right? So I've had trees taken down and I've had things trimmed, which is annoying. But the other thing I would just move on to is that as Wayland is trying to put more housing in, you're going to expand and still be taking down more trees. And that's not a good thing, but then again, we still have to put housing in, right? So that's a big thing to resolve. But the other thing I would add about, I put down no-mow grass, which is the same thing. It cuts to a certain height and falls over. And it actually worked pretty well where it took. But then what I found is, and I found out later they have better ones, is that it clumps. But it really does work. And I've stopped mowing that section except maybe once a year, right? So that works out great. And I've tried to reduce that. So that is a good thing that we could be saying, like, if you're going to put seed down, at least put down the stuff, because the benefit is you don't have to mow it. So, you know, I would push that part.
Is it expensive?
I don't know. I don't remember. I did it about 10 years ago. So I bought a bag from something that was out like in the Middle West, like in Michigan or something, Prairie Nursery. I'm not sure they're still there. But I didn't know. I never did check if Pearl's Premium, that's Jackson, right?
Pearl's
Yes,
Premium.
Pearl's
but
That's the
Premium,
same
yeah.
thing or something along those
Russell
lines?
sells one that's northeast so-and-so, and they said that it's at least as good. But I find for your money, clover.
Yeah.
And I've tried, that never made it out on
The
the
white
lawn, but I was
clover,
going
not
to try
the
that.
Clover's a wonderful
red
thing.
clover.
It's good for the bees too.
It's good for
It's
everything.
the nature, no, what is it now called, the New England Plant Trust? They changed the name. They were pushing.
Plant Trust,
What?
Native Plant Trust.
Native Plant Trust.
Native Plant Trust.
Sorry, close. They were pushing something else that wasn't clover, but it was something similar that looks like grass, sort of, but you can walk through it, and it's sort of, you know, it's tough and you can handle it, so that was something else. But really, I think housing is going to be a big issue as you go forward, because one, if we're going to be building new housing, you're gonna have to be either retrofitting, because if they're gonna do the accessory units, that kind of stuff, or if they're just, we can convince people to not build as big, because that would be the other thing, is they're McMansionizing. I don't think Wayland has controls of saying you can only get so big and then you need to stop. But that's a whole housing thing which rolls right back into infrastructure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, those are all really excellent points, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I mean, as Tom said, trees are part of the Wayland Climate Action Mobilization Plan, and there's a lot of focus areas that, you know, I'm still getting up to as moving on into my role. I've only been here for a few months now, but all really good points that were expressed today, and I'm happy to look into those further and be a resource. If you ever, you know, want to communicate or bring other questions to my attention, please feel free. You know, my office is right around the corner here, and my email is on the resource sheet as well. I think we're just about out of time, but I'm sure Julie, Nathan, and I will stick around for a little bit if anybody has any questions related to like personal circumstances or things like that. But yeah, thank you all so much.
Can I just ask one more question?
Of course, yeah.
What's the idea for when that actually starts to seriously flood? Like, how much rain do we have to get for that to really flood? Do you have a number in mind?
Tom's definitely the expert on that one.
Comment on that. Look at the Wayland Museum website. I've done 2 presentations there of
Historical Society?
yeah, the Historical Society of the history of flooding in town. WaylandMuseum.org is the website. Flooding in town, it's not we've had 7 major floods in the last 100 years.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And 3 of them were catastrophic. The last one was 2010. Probably most of you were here then. We lost the library, we lost the public safety building. Yeah, flooding is a big problem in Wayland. The really bad ones typically happen not as a result of any one large storm, but as a result of multiple storms. 2010, there was a big storm in the middle of March. There was another one a week later, and a third one a week after that. And it was when the third one happened on top of those earlier ones that the water hadn't left.
Yeah, the ground was still frozen too, I think, right?
And the ground was still frozen. So 55 was another major one, a hurricane, 2 in a row, and 36 was the worst one before that. Again, multiple storms, one right after the other. So you can't talk about a particular level, it's also the pattern of how it arrives.
Now, in California, don't they collect some of the water underground in those large bin cisterns?
Well, that's one of the strategies. They're doing that in Boston as well. There's a big, huge underground pipe which is acting as a reservoir.
Elm Island could use that road.
Okay, sorry, I have to raise my pet issue. I have studied this issue a lot, and one thing we could do in Wayland is recognize that the old railroad trestle is a major flow impediment. In fact, I'm presenting tonight to the Board of Public Works. I took a video of the of trestle a couple of weeks ago and how it's, you know, on the upstream side, the water is still. On the downstream side, it is rushing and turbulent. It is obviously acting as a barrier. We ought to do something about that. It's legally complicated because the railroad right-of-way is owned by MBTA, and they're looking at making a rail trail out of it now under DCR. So, you know, multiple state agencies involved, lots of complications. But I think it can be addressed with large culverts through the causeway to improve the flow through that whole mechanism. And it needs the town to address it, recognize it, climb on board.
So is that the primary reason why the rail trail has not been completed in that
No,
section?
No, has nothing to do with that. But I think we ought to address that prior to building the rail trail. Because once that's built, it's another barrier
Right.
to doing anything
Right.
about it.
Is Governor Healy aware of that?
No.
Is this rail trestle that's still there, is it doing anything useful?
Well, we'll support the rail trail.
No, I mean, but right now, it's, I mean, there are other ways that you could
Yeah, I was
place a
here.
trestle with.
I was here in 1971 when the last train went through Wayland. And it hasn't had a function since then. But nobody's had a motivation to do anything about it, or even
I would think a
even
flood would
recognize
be a
the problem.
motivation.
What's that?
I would think a flood would be a motivation.
Well, it has to be recognized that it's an element of the flooding. Another major element, by the way, is the Bill Ricka Dam. That has been an element for over 300 years. With any luck, that will finally be removed next year.
Oh, wow.
Another thing I'm a member of is the River Stewardship Council. We've been pushing this for a long time. So that's in the works.
Tom, is that railroad trestle that thing that we see out in kind of the marshy area?
South of Route 20, yeah.
Oh, south of Route
You
20,
drive on
so it's
Route
like beyond
20.
Russell's and,
Beyond Russell.
Yes, beyond Russell's.
oh,
Right.
okay.
West
Just
of
sort of
Russell's.
sticking out there. Yeah, okay. I always wondered what that was.
Well, it carried the railroad there from 1880
Yeah.
until 1971.
So Tom, the Bill Ricka Dam, my understanding is that would bring everything down about 3 or 4 feet
Wow.
under the trestle, and it has a huge impact, is that right, or what?
No, the Bill Ricka Dam will lower the water level by that much right behind it. But about a mile upstream of that is a natural barrier called the Fordway Bar, which is only maybe a half a foot lower than the dam. So it will have an impact on Wayland. It impounds water up, all the way up at low water up to about Wayland High School. But it will probably only make a difference of a few inches.
Okay.
But add the few inches to, I calculate as much as a foot from the railroad trestle effect in major floods like 2010. And, you know, you add all those up, and yes, it ought to make a huge difference at Pelham Island and also the center of town. Anyone who remembers 2010 remembers the middle of town.
The duck boats.
How much would it cost to take that down? I'm sorry.
To take what down?
The trestle.
Well, I wouldn't advocate that. I think, again, large culverts through the causeway to the west of the trestle would at least help.
Okay.
But the next step is we need an engineering study, a real engineering study. I'm a retired engineer, but I'm an electrical engineer, so I can understand what's happening to an extent. We need someone who's more of an expert in that area to really evaluate.
That's
And
interesting.
the next step.
I was never aware of this.
And don't expect it to go very fast either, because it's sitting in the middle of the Great Meadows Wildlife Refuge, and you've got
Right.
permitting that you're gonna have to do, because it's also got it's natural heritage and environmental, not environmental, what is it? Species, Act. So there's actual rare species over there too, so it's
You're
gonna
not
be a
allowed to
permitting
disturb
nightmare.
them. Yeah.
So just two quick things. One is that I think I heard, Abby, that you're doing a program at the library in February.
Oh, yes.
And so it'd be nice if everybody heard about that. And then just after that, I would just say thank you so much to all three of you for the work you're doing. It's really important. Get